Hi, thanks for joining me. We are at the crossroads, which is really the point in which you have the most power. The crossroads is the 5th season, and it doesn't exist anywhere in the world, as you know. There are 4 seasons, and we've gone through all the 4 seasons, but this 5th season is the magical one because it really is the point to which you decide the outcome of your interaction. So if you think about any of the conflicts that you've had with your partner, there was a point to which you decided, they're not getting away with that, or they don't get to do that to me, or this is not how it goes, and you get very defiant and defensive, and you start deciding, oh no, right? You were at the crossroads, and you chose winter. Right? You decided this is not how it's going to go. I'm going to show them. I'm going to tell them why they're wrong. I'm going to point out all the things they've done, right? So you were at the crossroads and you chose winter. The crossroads actually has 2 options, as any crossroads does, right? You do have the path to winter, which you've probably gone down many times, but there's another path, and I'm sure you've gone down that path too, but you might not have known it. So let's look at what the crossroads is. The crossroads is, of course, a time to choose. And at the crossroads, you may feel torn between reacting and responding. You might be anxious about which path to take. You might feel emotionally on edge, impatient to get through an issue, and you might feel intent on making a decision, but feel stuck. So when we're at the crossroads, we know we want to make a decision. We know we want to decide, do we behave this way or this way, but we don't necessarily know all the things because we haven't quite thought about it in terms of seasons. So now that we understand what winter is and what summer is, it's much easier for us to understand. It isn't a pros and cons list because really you don't have all the time to break down all of that thinking. When you stand at the crossroads and your husband or your wife or your partner walks into a room and does something that elicits this reaction in you, this like, and you stand at this crossroads, you decide right there and then, do I want to go to winter? Do I want the outcome to be conflict and chaos and anger and lashing out and perhaps aggressive or passive aggressive communication? Do I want it to be finger pointing and blaming and shaming? Is that the path? Or is the path to summer, in which we find common ground, in which I give grace and space, where I ask questions instead of starting in on any kind of finger pointing or any kind of retaliatory reactions? Right? When you start saying, wow, is everything okay? It completely diffuses the conversation because now the person recognizes, that came off a little bit sharp or strong, or wow, that was really rude of me to do that, or yeah, what's wrong with me? What's going on? Like, I have to evaluate where I am. I need to check myself, right? Like, check the energy I bring and the angst that I bring and the blame and, the outward projection of my internal turmoil. The crossroads is really a time in which you get to evaluate that. And I'm not saying once you know about the seasons, you're always going to choose summer, because there are times that you want to choose winter. Perhaps for a very long time, you accepted behavior that you really didn't like. There was something that kept happening in your relationship, and you're like, oh, fine, right? And maybe at some point, you can't say fine anymore. At that point, you might go into winter because you need to spring clean something. Right? There might be a time in which you need to go into winter and you need to fight and you need to put your foot down and you need to draw harsh boundaries to kind of clear the air. That happens. It doesn't happen as often as people think, but it definitely does happen. What we want to get to is a point to which how often can we choose summer, and how can we choose summer more? Because once we start understanding, okay, I feel this in the moment. I feel hurt. I feel anger. I feel like, what the heck just happened, right? I have all of this stuff inside and I'm reacting. If you can take a pause for a moment and say, where do I want this to go? What is the best case scenario in this interaction? It's not about this moment. It's about in 10 minutes. Do we still want to be screaming and squabbling and fighting and, slamming doors in 10 minutes? Or do we want to be cuddling on the sofa and turning on a movie and seeing, our favorite show together, right? Where do we want the outcome to be? The crossroads is where you get to choose that. And what typically happens is people will go into winter, and then they'll start to say, oh, that was the crossroads for us, right? You start to recognize what it looks like. What is that point to which a decision is made? Because if you are in summer and your partner comes home and they blah, 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 unleash everything all over you, that's not winter. That's not relationship winter, okay? That's personal winter. That is them in winter. You at this point are not in winter. But when you decide to either shield yourself from all of their blah, blah, blahs, or you push back with your own fiery blah, blah, blahs, therein lies winter, right? So you chose the winter path. So being at the crossroads is an opportunity for you to say, okay, if I attack back, and I'm calling it, I'm defending myself, but in actual fact, I will do a little defensive and then I'll go on the offensive and tell them and unleash my anger and frustration on all of these things on them. So it becomes a double-edged sword there. You're no longer at the crossroads. You've chosen winter. To choose summer is to make a different decision. And it's to say, I'm not sure if you meant to say it this way, but this is what I'm hearing. Is that what you meant? And your partner can say, oh no, sorry, no, I didn't mean that, right? And so you circumnavigated winter and you pulled them back into summer, right? You reflected back what they sounded like. Instead of reacting to them, you responded. And you said, did you mean to do that? Did you mean to say that? Was that what you intended? Is there a reason why you're so angry? Like, can you share with me what's going on? When you come from this place at the crossroads of giving pause to your own emotional fiery reaction and allow the other person to take responsibility for what they just brought into the interaction, winter will become much less frequent and much less intense, especially if you have a partner who is very passionate or very emotional, very big, big, passionate, responsive, arms flailing. If you have that kind of a partner, it's often helpful for you to reflect back. Did you mean that? Because this is what I heard. And they'll think, oh my gosh, no, of course I didn't mean that. Oh, okay, because that's what I heard. Can you try again? And so that becomes something you will work into your toolbox is, can you say that a different way? Because if I hear it the way that you just said it, I'm going to feel pretty hurt. Or is there something else going on? Because it feels like your reaction is not quite in proportion to the shoes not being on the bench. Whatever your style is. But reflecting back when you're at the crossroads allows your partner to take ownership of their part. Now, when you're not in winter, you can say, a boundary would be, if you have something to tell me that I'm doing wrong, I would really love it if you could say it softly, or, give me a kiss and say, I just want to let you know that, I love you very much and I just love coming home to you, but it's really hard when, there's all the shoes are all over at the front door and I can't walk in. I don't want to trip. Sometimes I'm carrying bags. Can Can we just try to keep a path? You will probably say, of course, yes, of course, I will push the shoes out of the way, or why don't we buy a shoe tree, or come up with a different solution, right? But someone coming in a winter storm has the likelihood to pull you down, and you're at the crossroads, you get to choose. So that might take doing a mental or physical, what is the path to winter in this scenario, and what is the path to summer in this scenario? And you might need for the first little bit to write out, okay, so this thing just happened. If I respond this way, it's definitely winter. What can I do to get us back to summer? Okay, which one do I want to decide on? Like, how do I personally make decisions, right? And so it really pushes you to be very intentional with your language, with your communication, with putting your hurt in the right place, putting your anger in the right place, putting your frustration in the right place. Look, we have all the emotions, right? There's nowhere in this course that I say you have to be happy all the time, you have to be positive, you have to take it, take it. Not at all. Not at all. What I'm saying is we have all the emotions. You can feel everything. But if you are behaving in a winter way, if you are purposefully or because you can't regulate your emotions, unintentionally pushing winter onto your partner over and over, there's some work there that needs to happen, right? If your partner keeps lashing out at you, there's something else going on. It has nothing to do with the shoes at the door, right? And so outside of a winter conversation, when you are in summer, talk about that. Hey, I'm noticing when you come home at the end of the day, you're really unhappy. Is everything going on okay at work? No, everything's not okay at work. My manager is off on maternity leave and I have this other person in charge and he's undermining me, or he's, assigning me and you think, oh wow, I had no idea. It has nothing to do with the shoes, right? Sometimes we do displace our frustration and our anger. And just like children, we put our big emotions on our partners because they are our safe place. But at the crossroads, you really need to choose, am I going back to summer or am I going back to winter in this interaction? Because that defines a lot of things for us. That kind of guides a lot of conversation. And we don't want to get stuck at the crossroads and only think about the path to winter. How can we retaliate? How can we exact vengeance? How can we make them hurt too? How can we teach them a lesson? If we're in that space, it's going to be really hard to find summer. So use the crossroads for what it is. It is the chance to pause and evaluate your two options. Do I go back to winter, or can I get us back to summer? Can I go back to summer and invite my partner over to summer with me? Sometimes they need to stay in winter, and you can really say, babe, I see you're in winter right now. I'm just gonna go out for a walk, and why don't you just do what you need to do here? Have some alone time, blast some music, grab your guitar, pour yourself, a nice hot cup of cocoa, take a bath, have a shower, go work out. I'm just gonna give you some space. And maybe later we can talk about it, right? That really is drawing a boundary that says you aren't gonna jump in and take that negativity as your own fuel to then reattack them, right? You're really drawing a very clear boundary, and that's the power of the crossroads. So let's see what we learned in the crossroads. We learned, how do we typically make decisions when we get to a place where winter is brewing? Do we jump in and react? Do we run away and hide? What are the ways that you deal with decision making? How does your partner typically make decisions? What do they do when they are in a personal storm? How do they vent off some of their frustrations? And then how can you be more intentional at the crossroads? So when you think about your time at the crossroads in the last few interactions you had with your partner, how can you be more intentional? How can you be more communicative about what you're hearing, what you're seeing, what you're feeling, what you are perceiving? Sometimes it's body language and it has nothing to do with the words that are being said, but it's the energy and it's the body language and it's the nonverbal communication cues that you think, there's something else going on here, right? We need to get into this. We need to come back to summer together. And then what are the best ways for you and your partner to explore the path to summer and the path to winter? And have this be an open conversation. Have this be something that says, you know, when you come home from work, or when I come back from the gym, or when the children wake up, or if, you know, your mom is in the hospital, or, you know, I notice these things. And then we always fall into the same argument that you're arguing with me about my brother, or you're arguing about, you know, the daycare provider, or whatever the argument is. How can we do that differently? I don't want to argue with you. I want to be on the same side. I want us both to be in summer. So this kind of is a pattern for us. We typically trip over this, and this kind of is a storm that we keep falling, you know, we find ourselves in this storm. Can we brainstorm some ways that we can choose differently? Because I don't want to fight with you. I don't want to fight with you. And allow the feelings and the values and the expectations to kind of come to the surface so you know the full picture, right? We're not going to spotlight on the tiny thing. We want the whole picture. And when we see the whole picture, we can together say, when we get to this point, what if we tried this to get back to summer? What if we tried that? Do you think it would work? Can we try that? Right? Make it actually a goal that when you get to that place, somebody will say, I think we're at a crossroads. Can we try to get back to summer by doing this? It'll kind of shake the mood, and the person either will say, okay, or they'll be like, no, that's ridiculous. We're not doing this, you know, and then you'll be like, okay, I see you're not ready for summer. I'm not ready for winter. So I'm going to take a time out and I'm going to go do something in my individual garden. I'm going to paint. I'm going to read. I'm going to go clean the bathroom, or whatever you want to do. But you just really put the words out there so that they need to take responsibility for the energy that they're bringing. It's a game changer. The Crossroads is a game changer. I'm telling you, it changes everything. Finish your assignment in this chapter. Go through the winter path, the summer path for a couple of your past interactions that ended up in winter, and see where you could have done differently, where your partner could have done differently. And then, as you know better, you can do better. All right, I will talk to you in the next video. Thank you for staying with me through this one. I know it's complicated because it doesn't exist in the world, but you're such a trooper, and I'm grateful that you're here. I will see you in the next video. Take care.